I wriggled in my seat a little, trying to make myself comfortable. I didn't fly very often. As I sat there, peering out the plane window, I thought about my family, and I thought about my childhood. I was visiting my parents and sister in Italy. I would also be visiting the village where I grew up. I moved to America years ago. I told myself it was a chance for more opportunities, adventure, and a chance to live a cultured, urban life. But those were not the only reasons. There was one reason that I did not like to think about, but while I sit on this plane, gazing out the window, the past comes to me again. I remember when I was 10 years old. Just an ordinary boy, slightly mischievous and craving his next birthday. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, and I couldn't sleep. So I did something that I like to do once in a while. I stood over my sister's bed, grinning. She lay there, sleeping peacefully. I made a throaty groan. Her eyes fluttered open and widened at the sight of me. I heard a small gasp. I made a goofy, raspy noise. She was scared at first, but a frightened frown turned into a small smile when she realized it was only me. And so, she picked up a throw pillow and patted me on the cheek with it. The goofy grin remained fixed to my face. This was something we never did again. Not after it happened. You see, I grew up in Santa Limora, a small village in Sicily. It was a dreamy, beautiful place. Children played in luscious, green yards as their mothers baked delicious pies, their heavenly scents wafting through the air as they cooled on windowsills. The delightful scents of basil and lemon also filled the air. Elderly people sat on their porches while parents cradled their babies on their laps. If it were Sunday, church bells rang through the air. If it were Christmas time, the homes and shops would be adorned with merry decorations. And on any given day, you could walk to the beach and lie on the shore as crystal waves lapped against the sand. But it also had many of the setbacks of little villages. If you wished to become famous, or at the very least get a serious job, you couldn't really stay here, and everyone knew everyone else's business. Most of all, however, legends and folklore were utterly rampant. Tales ranged from night creatures to shape-shifting bears to evil fairies. The elderly loved to tell these tales, and the teenagers loved to frighten the village children. As a young child, I heard my fair share of these stories, and many of them scared me. I would keep my curtains closed before dawn in fear of the night walker. I would check my closet nightly for the whirl. As I got older, I outgrew these tales and wrote them off as silly. Except for one. There was one tale that was different from the rest, one that really stood out to me. The Breathtaker. The Breathtaker was said to be an entity, a demon, a monster, something of the sort, that entered Sicilian homes, particularly small villages, in the middle of the night. It would awaken you from your sleep with a strange, breathy noise. When you opened your eyes and saw it, your breath would be taken away from fear. But that's not all of it. If you see the Breathtaker, you must close your eyes and go back to sleep. At the very least, close your eyes. Whatever you do not turn on a light. The Breathtaker is not like other monsters. It won't skin you or hurt you brutally. It won't bite you or attack you or try to kill you on the spot. No. The way it gets you is if you see it with the lights on. If you catch a glimpse of it in the dark, you'll be okay. But if you see it in the light, it will take your breath forever. Victims have been found choked to death with no marks around their necks. This story haunted me for years. Even as I got older, regardless of how much I tried to tell myself it wasn't real, I just couldn't convince myself that was the case. It still frightened me, even as a 10-year-old. What I think frightened me so much about it wasn't just a sinister concept. No. It was how it almost seemed like my parents responded to it. With stories like The Night Walker or The Whirl, my parents didn't seem to care much about them. There was no curtain shutting or closet checking. They seemed to pay them no mind. While they certainly didn't talk much about the Breathtaker, they behaved almost as if it were real. For starters, the lights in the house were always kept off at night. My parents told my sister and I that at night, we used to stay in bed. They were never fond of us waking up in the middle of the night and getting water or going to the bathroom. They even had us use the restroom before bed every night and keep a glass of water in our room just in case we happened to get thirsty. And if we did get up, they told us to keep the lights off if we could help it. I used to think nothing of it. That was before I heard of the breath taker. Kara, my older sister, regardless of her maturity, still seemed frightened by the breath taker. While she would usually mock other monsters and tales, this just seemed to bother her more. Nonetheless, even if the tale was unsettling, neither of us took it too seriously. But then again, that was before it happened. It was now 9 o'clock at night. My sister and I shared a room, but we didn't have bunk beds. Instead, we each had our own bed on each side of the room. Our parents tucked us in and bid us good night. We fell asleep shortly after. I awoke to a strange noise. I don't remember it. Maybe a sort of huff? It sounded like my breathing, but I couldn't tell. My eyes fluttered open. That was when I heard it. Enzo. My sister. Enzo, go back to sleep. Go back to sleep right now. Her voice was hushed and drenched with terror. She sounded almost breathless. Kara? I sat up, my eyes barely adjusted to the deep darkness that filled our room. I tried to find her bed, just a black rectangle near the end of the room. It looked like there was a tall thing behind it. I squinted, trying to make it out, but it was too dark. Was it Kara? It looked too tall. I felt my heart thumping in my chest. I rolled sideways out of the bed and put my feet on the ground. Go back to bed! Her shrill voice was strangled with fear. I began to walk towards the bed. Don't turn on the light, Enzo. Go back to bed. Don't turn on the light. It was tinged with anger, then faded to desperate pleading. Why shouldn't I turn on the light? Why was she standing over her bed like that? As I began to approach it, I noticed that it was not her standing. It couldn't have been. The figure was far too tall. I wanted so badly to turn on the light, but for some reason, she was demanding me not to. My stomach was starting to turn. My eyes, adjusting to the dark, were able to make out Kara lying in the bed. I looked up at the figure across it. Its head seemed to gaze down at her. Then it looked at me. I gasped uncontrollably. Enzo, no! She sounded almost like she was crying. Go back to bed right now. Who are you? I snapped, mustering fake courage. No answer. I could hear Kara sobbing quietly. I stared deeply into the figure. I struggled to make out the features, and I was on the verge of running to the light switch, till my eyes adjusted. At first, I thought it had the face of a human, but it didn't. Its mouth was open wide. In fact, it seemed to extend all the way from the jawline through the neck. It was lined with teeth. I started gasping again. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My heart throbbed as I tried to take in breaths, but I was nearly choking. At that moment, the sheets flung into the air as Kara rolled out of bed and grabbed me. She ran towards the door, pulling me behind. We ran together through the hallway and out of the house. We kept running through the town as fast as our weary legs could carry us. We ran until we got to the beach, and then threw ourselves down onto the icy sands. I realized I was breathing again. No, I was panting heavily, nearly out of breath. But at least I could breathe again. I looked at Kara, her face brimming with sheer terror. I'm sorry, I managed to gasp out. It's not your fault, she whispered. I was tired. I was scared. I was so exhausted. I awoke to the sound of squawking gulls. The smell of salt water filled my nose as I noticed the sound of waves crashing softly against the shore. I opened my eyes. The sky was a mild, orange color. It was nearly daybreak. I sat up and looked around at the beach. The sand was chilly from nighttime, and the cool November wind blew through my hair. I looked over to see Kara, still sleeping next to me. At first, I was overcome with confusion. Then memories of last night hit me like a ton of bricks. From then on, neither Kara nor I felt comfortable at night in our Sicilian village. When I turned 18, I moved to America to become a teacher. Kara and our parents left for Lombardy shortly after. I am now on a bus on my way to Sona Limora. It stops far before the village, so I'll have to walk some distance. I was talking to Kara over the phone, excited to see her soon. She lived in a more urban area, a large town, Ravenna. The bus stopped, and I said goodbye to her. I left the bus and began walking to Sona Limora. I was hit with a luscious sense of ginger and orange. Holly wreaths adorned municipal buildings and homes were draped with green and red lights, some of which were already glowing, since it was getting a little late. Christmas was in the air. I smiled at the joy of Italian Christmas time. The beautiful decorations and Christmas spirit filled me with merry thoughts as I walked to my village. I could see it vaguely from afar, but it was still too distant. All the merriness disappeared the moment I caught sight of my village. When I entered, there was no scent in the air. No lemon, no orange, no basil. There were no decorations anywhere. But the most disturbing part was the fact that no one was outside. When I was a child, people would be out and about. Children would play while adults went for walks. Parents would be on their neighbors' porches. There would be talking and laughter. But there was nothing. There was absolutely no one outside. The houses were dark, too. I walked out to the beach, my heart heavy with woe and sorrow, while also feeling slightly uneasy. What happened to my beautiful town? And why? The beach thankfully remained the same. Gulls squawked as waves crashed against the sand. I took off my shoes and walked onto the cool shore. The water was glistening and pristine, the wind blowing through my hair. As I was about to walk further out onto the beach, I heard a car approaching. I turned to see a police car parking near the edge of the beach. An officer came out and walked towards me. "Hey," he said, a little brusquely. "What are you doing here?" "I'm visiting my childhood town." My voice rang with melancholy. The officer shook his head. "You can't be here." I raised an eyebrow. This village has been abandoned for over a year. "What happened?" He was a little hesitant. "There were reports of people being found dead in their homes. It appeared that they had been choked to death. But we have no evidence, only claims from other family members. The village was evacuated. We've been working on the case, but as of right now, nobody can stay here." I thanked the officer for the explanation, put on my shoes, left the beach, and left the town. I'm unsettled, to say the least. In fact, I think I'm scared. Very scared. The Christmas spirit barely phases me as I hasten to the train station. I call Kara, telling her what happened. She sounds deeply sorrowful and slightly scared. I talk to her the whole time on the train, and I don't hang up until I'm in my hotel room. I barely remember what I did. Did I brush my teeth? Did I lock my door? All I know is that now I'm lying in my bed. My room is pitch black. I'm curled up in my covers, my eyes closed, trying to forget what happened. I begin to drift off to sleep. I am awakened by an odd breathing noise. Instinctively, I open my eyes slightly and twist to turn on the lamp.